All right, after Speaker Nancy Pelosi and House leadership on the Democratic side have blocked a vote on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act more than 80 times, they've also refused to schedule a hearing or to sign the discharge petition for the bill. So the Republican minority in the House of Representatives have scheduled a hearing on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act tomorrow. Joining me now is Republican Congressman Ron Estes, who represents the 4th District of Kansas and serves on the Ways and Means Committee. He'll be participating in this hearing tomorrow. Congressman Estes, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, thank you, Tony. It's great to be back. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this so important piece of legislation. You know, it's sad when we talk in the United States of America about a baby being born, in this case after a botched abortion, but that we don't require the medical care that we would give other Americans. And it's something important that we need to do and make sure we can get the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act passed through Congress.
And I think we got to use the proper terms here. I mean, this is infanticide is what's taking place here. And I know that there are many in Congress that are wanting to stop this. And I would have to imagine, Congressman Estes, that you and many of your colleagues are extremely frustrated after 80 attempts to try to get a vote on this on the House floor, only to be blocked each and every time.
It really is frustrating. You know, one of the things that you don't really appreciate until you're here is how much power the Speaker controls over what items get to the floor. And we've requested 80 times to bring this bill to the floor. Let's have an up or down vote on it, and people can vote their conscience, vote the policy, vote the politics if that's the way they want to vote. But we think it's so important that, babies that are born after a failed abortion, they ought to be given the medical care. And there's 200 of us, over 200, I think there's 201 of us now that have signed what's called a discharge petition. And it's a procedure that we have. If we can get 218 people to sign the discharge petition, then it forces the Speaker to bring it to the floor. And so we're continuing to work on that process, but we just think good legislation ought to be able to be voted on. And this is one of those things that really requires healthcare practitioners, doctors, and nurses to take care of babies.
Well, and I think this is more than just another piece of legislation. I mean, I think this is, in many ways, is a part of defining who we are as a nation. Will we as a people, as a nation, will we allow babies to be born alive and then to either be killed or allowed to die? I mean, is that who we are as America? And that is really what's at stake here, whether or not we pass this piece of legislation and allow a practice that some governors, like the governor of New York, have embraced as a standard of public policy.
It really is. You hit the nail on the head. What is it that defines us as a country? And we talk so much about protecting those that can't protect themselves. And in this case, a baby that's born that needs all of our protection, needs all of our care. And you said some states, New York and some others, are actually gone out and say that it's legal and that they should be practicing this murder in reality after that baby's been born. And it's something that we shouldn't stand for as Americans.
Now, Congressman Estes, we're going to be joined in just a few moments by Minority Whip Steve Scalise, who's been a key driver in this. But you have a role to play tomorrow in the hearing. You're going to be taking a testimony from doctors and nurses. Tell us about that.
That's right. We have several doctors that are going to come speak to us tomorrow and talk about what they've seen in terms of in neonatal care units, whether OBGYNs who at a rape center and what they've seen, how Planned Parenthood has actually promulgated this abortion process and killing the babies that are born. One nurse in particular, one of her stories is that there was a baby that was actually just left to die after the abortion, and she cared for it as best she could before it died. And it's really a sad state that this is what America's coming down to, that we even have to have this argument about about human life and whether we would degrade it to such levels. I mean, it's almost reminiscent of what you think about in the Holocaust and dictators around the world who so mistreat fellow human beings.
Let me allow you to address an issue that the opponents of this bill, those that are refusing to allow a vote to take place. Now, granted, they can vote however they want, but they don't want anybody to vote, so they're refusing to allow this to come to the floor. But they're saying this is a solution looking for a problem, that there's no reason for this, no justification exists for this legislation. What do you say to that?
Well, there are other laws on the books, including the 2002 Born Alive law, but they don't carry penalties for failure to carry out the care of that newborn baby. And we believe that any newborn child, want it or not, has a right to proper medical care. And that's really what the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act was designed to do. And there's so many of us in the conference that have talked about this is so important for us that we ought to make that part of what we stand for as Americans. And I'm glad that you mentioned that the Minority Whip Scalise is going to be on a little bit later, and he helped pull together the hearing tomorrow that we're having. And it was a struggle. I mean, the speaker wouldn't even allow us to have a committee room. Not only would they not schedule a hearing, but they wouldn't allow us to have a hearing room. And that's why we've got to go to a conference room to have this hearing. But we're pushing forward with it. We think it's a common sense approach. We think it really does define us as Americans and what's important, that we protect life from the moment that they're born.
Well, and the reporting requirements are such that only a handful of states actually report on the cases of born alive infants who survive an attempt of an abortion. But of those that do report, we know that there are cases of children being born alive. So we know that this is an issue. We, whether it's a handful or whether we actually know it's into the hundreds, but it's significant that it's taking place. And the law should be very clear that if a child is born alive, that medical attention should not be withheld from that child. And that's all that this legislation does. It, as you said, there's already laws on the books with no enforcement. This would ensure that medical professionals would be required, if a baby is born alive, heart beating, it's alive, it is a baby, that health care be given to that child. That's all it does.
That's right. I mean, that baby that's born alive should be given the same medical treatment that any other newborn baby gets. And we think it's important we talk about. And, like you said, we don't know whether it's hundreds or thousands or how many the number is because it is underreported and not tracked in so many places. But it gets back to what is the standard that we want to have for America. And we've always talked about standing up for folks that can't take care of themselves, and a newborn baby's a perfect example of that we need to provide them medical care.
All right, Congressman Ron Estes, thank you so much for taking time to join us today, and we'll be watching very closely the hearing tomorrow.
All right, thank you very much.
It's Congressman Ron Estes of Kansas. And by the way, on that number, according to the CDC, going from 2000 to 2014, just a handful of states actually report to the CDC on these cases, but it's over 500 of children that have been born alive.